For the past few weeks, we've been having a downside corrected bias here for Bitcoin. In today's video, we're still continuing to see this nice, slow, but very, very steady downside move for Bitcoin Evolve. And in today's video, we'll be going over exactly where I'd be looking for this one to find a little bit of a reprieve, and then also what I'm essentially doing on the higher term timeframes here from a more investing mindset. Anyways, first things first, we're going to start this one off, as always, with some good old revisiting of the daily price action statistics. It is absolutely hilarious how many times we're going to witness one of these scalpable moves once again play out. It is absolutely insane that this continues to do what it's going to be doing, but I guess at this point it's not much of a surprise. Anyways, for Thursday, it is actually the most likely day to close negatively out of any weekday since this bull market began in 2023. Maybe the bull market is over, who knows? But 56% of all Thursdays have been closing negatively within that time frame. However, we are, as always, most interested in the average gains and the average losses for winning and losing Thursdays, respectively, which are 1.89% and 81% on the negative side right there. So as you can see, Bitcoin's already traded up to what would have been that area of interest for the average return on a positive closing Thursday. That was the 103,600 tick, and quickly selling off from that number. So again, you have another example of a very, very, very scalpable play right there in front of your face. It is absolutely beautiful. I do implore that anyone... What the hell is that noise? Some tapping going on in the background. Hey, cut it out. Anyways, just yelling at random people in my building. Anyways, yes. So, another example of a highly scalpable move here. Again, if you are a little bit more on the intermediate side or perhaps advanced as well, I think that you can see the value in this indicator. And once again, there is this is a pretty big move that we've already seen from that top end test. But I would say on the other side, if you do see Bitcoin approach what would be the average loss for a losing Thursday, that would give an area of interest at around 99,800 or so. So if you do see Bitcoin hit around that number today, I would be expecting at least a small bounce on that first pass. Again, first pass, yes. Second pass, significantly less likely. It's only the first pass that does have that very high probability. And in which case, I would say that on this particular move, because the trend is down, because the trend is indeed your friend, well, I wouldn't get too cute if it does come down to this number, again, at 99,800. I wouldn't get super aggressive with targeting like a big bounce, in other words. Anyways, as we move on from here, I do want to once again acknowledge the MetaSignals short-term short setup on the hourly time frame, which fired off, I believe, a couple days ago. This is from their algo version 1.0, and this one fired off when Bitcoin was trading at about 105 or just above 105, 105,000 US dollars, that is. And we can see target number one and target number two have both been hit, which is quite nice as Bitcoin, as these continue to play out. Or actually, has target number two been hit? Let's see. 101 is the number, and yes, actually, it has been hit this morning. Okay, beautiful. So we have seen target number one and target number two get hit. I did say on yesterday's live stream, if target number two is hit, I would expect that target number three is very, very likely. And that is still the case here. And that is also a region or an area of interest around 99,000 bucks, give or take a few $100 from that number, technically a little bit lower there at 98,772 if you want to be super exact. The probability of this, as you can see right here, is just over 41%. Typically speaking. However, because of the way that things are set up, because of the trend, because of everything else that we're going to speak about in this video, I do think that target number three is somewhat likely, within the next day or two, perhaps. I mean, Thursday is probably as good a day as any to have some red action, some red dildo action in my face, but, might take a little bit longer than that. And ultimately, if Bitcoin does get down around there, I actually do still think that you're probably going to get another bounce from that number, to be honest, as well. So I wouldn't get super, super bearish just yet or anything like this. Still think that there's some hopium for, Bitcoin pulling through to the upside. And as we'll go over later, I actually don't hate this area for very, very, very long-term investments. Of course, if you're a trader or short-term, this, in my opinion, is not the case. But as far as this goes, yeah, we are going to see this very likely play out, or at least that's what I'd be leaning towards, as long as Bitcoin is very specifically below yesterday's high. As long as Bitcoin's below yesterday's high, I would generally be leaning in that direction, more or less. So yeah, on top of this though, I do want to acknowledge that MetaSignals does have a daily setup as well. This is for their 2-spot 1 algo version right here. And this one fired off at 103, and the stop loss is on a closure below about 98,000 bucks. So it is very well possible that we see both the short and the long setup play out. People might be asking, how could that be possible? Well, the short setup is on the hourly time frame. the long setup is on a daily time frame. And naturally, you can have two different time frames, which are massively different time frames, play out setups that actually both come to their intended point, and neither are invalidated. So it could be that we see the downside move first. This doesn't just close below 98,000 bucks, and then you get a nice rally, and maybe it does play out some of these upside targets here. Very possible, because target number one here on this daily time frame setup is actually just above 108,000 US dollars, and that does have a just over 77% probability to be hit historically. So I would pay, I would heed, or I would pay some attention. I would heed some attention. No, I would pay some attention to that, as I do think that does matter. I mean, I don't like betting against things that are very high probability. But again, putting it into the general framework of this, we could easily see both these play out. So I would not discount the upside setup until you see Bitcoin closing below about 98,000 bucks. Anyways, moving on from there and working my way down my notes here. Yes, the downside bias in the short term does continue. Like I said, if we go over here to CME and look at your 12-hour and upper time frames, momentum is once again turning freshly to the downside, going along the same trendline regression from the last few highs. This one a little bit more aggressively, to be fair, but this one is going to be showing downside momentum as long as the 12-hour time frame is closing below 103,750 bucks. The daily time frame is going to actually potentially cross the upside here if Bitcoin can finish the day above 102,200, which would actually be quite nice. And then, of course, the 2-day, 3-day, 5-day, all of these things are still going to be down, but they are getting into some pretty critical territory. So, I do think that could very easily align with at least a reprieve on a bounce. Just because, you don't really see momentum try to hang out at these super low levels for super long. But anyways, the 2-day time frame is pivoted at 106,400. The 3-day time frame is it's just straight down, but it's pivoted to the downside as long as you're below 107,450. And the 5-day time frame is going to continue pretty heavily downside here as well, as long as you're below about 116,700, which I don't think you're going to be reclaiming anytime soon. So yeah, the overall downside bias does remain. I do think that there could easily be a step lower as well, but is there going to be a bounce in between there? Probably, yeah. And this whole situation, this whole scenario gets drawn out for longer and longer. I mean, that's just how these things fucking go. This market is intended to bore the shit out of you, because boring the shit out of you is actually the best way to make you capitulate, in fact. Anyways, going onwards and forwards from there, let's see what else we got. Yes, we still got this setup here. This setup based off of the 5-day, which has not closed yet. And this also helps out with the short-term downside bias, because anytime that we've seen that red moving average on the 5-day timeframe for CME cross to the downside of the yellow moving average, we have gotten a minimum correction down to the green moving average each and every time, each and every beautiful time throughout the full history of CME. And if we were to go to spot price action, we could run that back for the past 8 years. Anyways, as it stands right now, that green moving average is at 99,175. Again, that is a minimum corrective target here. And, it might take another few periods, as we have seen in the past throughout this cycle, but, all of these do at some point come down. Again, this is not a great trade setup right here. It is just for directional YouTube bias. And yeah, that would still be down around 99,000 bucks. And again, that is minimum. So we could see a wick below, maybe closer to 98, and then a bit of a bounce attempt from there. I do think that is rather possible. And to be fair, if you want some hopium here, I guess the hopium would be that all of the major lows throughout this current cycle have come off of tests to that green moving average on the 5-day time frame, the 55 EMA. So, I mean, if the bull market is still on, perhaps we do see a low formed around there. If Bitcoin really starts to lose that number, though, or lose that level, that's where things start to, in my opinion, become a lot more, a lot more not so nice, we'll say. Anyways, moving on from there. Let me just make sure that I'm hitting my notes properly here. Boom, 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 boom. Yep, okay. What would be an obvious bullish pivot? It's kind of a difficult question right now. The first and most important one is going to be, or at least most new one, is going to be this 108 high right here, just below 108 from Monday of this week. If Bitcoin can reclaim that, I would be looking for a rally into, at least 111, 112, 113 region. That would start to look pretty damn good, but I would not confirm overall bullishness until you're back above this high right here from late October, which was 116,500 or so. So I would keep an eye on that. As long as you're below there, it is still questionable territory, I suppose. But, one thing before the next. And ultimately, I wouldn't really be entertaining any sort of like massive potential major reversal until at minimum you're back above this high right here again, 108, which is somewhat good news because if this setup over here does play out, then, well, that would imply that you do actually reclaim that number. So let's just kind of draw what it would probably look like on price if Bitcoin were to play out that, or were to actually, be somewhat bullish from this current base. And it would probably, again, still be accompanied by a short-term move to the downside here. Let me just get rid of all of this, make it nice and simple. Draw out the LARP lines, maybe it comes down like this, boom, then a quick reversal. And if that reversal brings you back above this high, then you are potentially in business. You're potentially in business, not because it's going to go, fucking vertical like that. I mean, it's possible, I guess, but probably not. But, maybe pull back into a higher low. Then that sets you up for the real move. And if you can claim this number, then, hey, I'm fucking game. I'm fucking game. And I'm also gay. And also... Sorry. Anyone who's new here is probably just like, what the fuck is this moron saying? And I hate him. Fair enough. Many people, there's many such cases, but yes, as it stands right now, until that happens, I would still be somewhat wary of any sort of like real reversal and continuation of this bull market. But like I said, I'm not really willing to call it either which way right now. I am very agnostic. I'm just taking this market one step at a time. And while I do think that there is short-term downside, I ain't calling it quits just yet until Bitcoin's below some pretty nasty numbers. Let's just call it like 90,000 or so. As far as what would be the next sort of area of interest if Bitcoin were to really lose this current base that it's trying to construct here at the upper 90s, I think the most obvious area is going to be, of course, this gap from CME coming in back from about 91.5 to 92,000 bucks, also in alignment or around at least that blue 377 EMA. So if you do see price action back down around there, I would be looking for a bounce on the first pass, but yeah, going to look a lot less enticing after that. That would start to really break the long-term sort of trend structure here. But like I said, regardless of all of this, if I'm putting on my long-term investor hat, I actually am adding to some long-term baggies here. I have gotten some signals from my LTI tool, which is my long-term investor tool. And again, this is only intended for buys that are meant to be held for, at least 5 years, but personally, I'll be holding this for, 10 years or more. And generally, I'm just buying long-term value areas because I believe in the long-term health of Bitcoin. Does not mean I expect these buys to immediately go into profit and be profitable for forever. And I just ride these on for the whole of my lifetime, just completely ever untested. No, I completely expect that any buys I make right here will go underwater, or at least they will go underwater at some point. And if we fast forward, about 5-10 years from now, I will be quite happy with those, as I have been throughout this cycle following this exact schedule. By the way, we've gotten a lot of feedback on the LTI. And I will say now that we are going to release it, not this week, not next week, but the week of Black Friday. And I'm very, very excited about that because I think that this is a tool that many people can benefit from because, let's just be honest, not everyone's going to be a fucking trader, Not everyone's going to be a fucking trader. Not everyone needs to be a fucking trader, but most people should and certainly do have the capacity to be a long-term investor. And I think that this tool is going to be massively beneficial for that. I'll be releasing my settings for this for different scenarios as well. And like I said, that'll be coming in on the week of Black Friday. Other than that, we got our other tools as we already went over. We got meta signals. I didn't state the obvious again with meta signals, but hey, the meta signals lifetime access to via their NFT is going to be going away somewhat soonish. They're going to make an announcement on the 15th, as you can see right here. I believe it's going to have something to do with that. Again, I'm an investor in this project because, well, most importantly, I believe in it. Like I've seen it for the last few years. Like that's enough for me, really. But there will be a limited time to get that lifetime access for the NFT. And okay, here is the actual secret. The NFT holders will get access to the pre-sale that they're going to do for their upcoming token, which I think is slated for like January, February, something like this. So just a little bit of some insider information right there. But yeah, you didn't hear it from me. Other than that, I think it's a good place for me to be leaving off on this video. In fact, now that I recognize it, price action pivots indicator is once again perfectly analyzing exactly where I would be considering the most recent and most respectable lower high on the daily time frame, which is probably the best thing to manage biases off of as of this moment. That is just below 108,000 US dollars. By the way, the price action pivots indicator can be used somewhat similarly to the HPAS over here. Generally, first tests into that price action pivot, they usually are scalpable moves. But yeah, we'll maybe go into a greater detail on that on a different video. I think that's enough for now. Again, short term still more or less likely to trade to the downside. Wouldn't necessarily get super bearish on this next move. I do think that Bitcoin's more poised to bounce from this base here at the upper 90s, whether it's 98 or 99, I don't fucking know, but I don't think that you're going to get significantly lower lows before having another bounce first. And then the real question is, does Bitcoin reclaim any of the critical regions that we spoke about on that next bounce? And if it doesn't, well, it's a long way down to go, I guess. But for right now, Hopium's still somewhat alive. Just, short term is still more or less downside angled. And other than that, we'll come back tomorrow with another Friday live stream. Very much excited about that. Been having a lot of fun on the live streams recently. Want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's been joining in on those. It's always fun to do some community engagement and just talk, shooting the shit. Good conversations recently as well, just because I suspect it's because the market's actually rather quiet right now. So only the true fucking crypto nerds, Bitcoin nerds are sticking around at this point. Those are my kind of people. So let's take a quick look actually at traditional markets before we shut this one off. I just want to see them for myself because I actually haven't checked in on them just yet. What's NASDAQ futures looking like? A little bit of a lower high right there. So it does look like the corrective move is going to continue onwards and maybe have another swipe at around 25,000 bucks. But certainly not bearish on this. Just, short-term downside move to 25, probably another bounce there as well. SPY futures, a little bit stronger respectively. If it could reclaim yesterday's high, I would immediately get bullish for a move to prior all-time highs and, likely just new all-time highs, into fucking 7,000. Why not? But other than that, not really too much to be speaking about right here. SPY still bullish as long as you're above this price action pivot low. Beautiful price action pivot low, by the way, as well at 66.50. And of course, NASDAQ, same thing. And that number would be 24,700. Again, all of these tools that we use today, you can try out for 7 days for free in the link description below for Teachable. It's literally no strings attached, nothing like that. You can try it out, see if you like it, see if you don't like it as well, and go from there. Other than that, I'm going to be shutting shit off and I'm going to go hit the bag, baby. Destroy my shoulders a little bit more, but it is always worth it, building up that VO2 max. Anyways, wish you the best as always. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully Friday.